morning, students. Today we will study figures of speech. As we know that figures of speech is one of the important parts of the syllabus, or one has to study figures of speech while studying poetry. Today we will discuss the different figures of speech used by different poets in the poetry section. First figure of speech is alliteration. What is alliteration? Alliteration is a repetition of consonant sound at the beginning of the words. It means we see the repetition. Repetition of what? Repetition of consonant sound. But where? Repetition of consonant sound at the beginning of words. That is alliteration. For example, here we have an example. I would like to read the line of the poem. Like the plumes of a peacock, purple and green. In this line, you will find the consonant sound p has been repeated at the beginning of the words plumes, peacock and purple. This is an example of alliteration. Once again, I tell you, alliteration is repetition of consonant sound at the beginning of words. Second figure of speech is simile. Simile is a direct comparison. Direct comparison between different things or objects. It is direct comparison. After this example, you will understand what simile exactly. I would like to read the poem. And how their wives do hum like bees. In this line, there is a direct comparison between wives and bees. You will find it. How would one understand this is a direct comparison? When there is a use of the words as such as or like, these words shows the direct comparison. Once again, carefully notice the example. And how their wives do hum like bees. In this line, you will understand, you will observe there is a use of word like, and this is the direct comparison between wives and bees. Wives are like bees. This is a direct comparison. That is simile. Next figure of speech is metaphor. Students, metaphor is quite opposite of simile. It means it is an indirect comparison. Indirect comparison between two different things or objects. For example, in simile what happens? A is like B. But in metaphor, A is B. It is suggested or indirected comparison. Here we have an example. The camel is the sheep of desert. In this line, camel is indirectly compared with sheep. Sheep of desert. Camel is indirectly compared with sheep. Sheep of desert. That is metaphor, indirect comparison or suggested comparison. Next figure of speech is personification. Personification means, or in personification what happens? In personification, non-living things or object are treated as living things. Non-living things or objects treated as human things. For example, see the example. The sun in heaven was shining gay. All things are joyful on that day. See, in this line, gay and joyful are human qualities. And these human qualities have been given to the sun and all things. Means non-living things have been treated as living things. That is personification. Okay, next figure of speech is antithesis. Antithesis. In this figure of speech, you will notice that anti means opposite and thesis means ideas. In antithesis, what happens? When two opposite ideas are brought together, when two opposite ideas or things brought together to highlight contrast, it is antithesis. It is an example of antithesis. Say, example, one shade the more, one ray the less. In this particular line of the poem, you will understand the words more and less are opposite, and these two words have been brought together to highlight contrast. That is an example of antithesis. Once again, I would like to tell you what is antithesis. When two opposite ideas are brought together to highlight contrast, that is antithesis. Okay. Next figure of speech is repetition. Repetition is very easy to understand. It is very easy poetic devices to understand. In repetitions, generally we see the repetition of words or lines. There is a repetition of words and lines in the poem. For example, henceforth I whimper no more, postpone no more. In this particular line, you will notice, you will observe that the word no more is repeated. But what is the purpose of repetition in the poem, in the line of the poem? The intention behind repetition is to create musical effect in poem. That is the main objective of repetition of this particular figure of speech. Generally we understand, we see repetition of words and lines in the poem. That is repetition. Next figure of speech is inversion. Inversion means changing the order of the words in the sentence or in the line of the poem. Poet sometimes changes the word order according to their or their own way. Generally, poet has freedom. They have freedom, and they use the words accordingly. They changes the word order. In this slide, in example, you will see the example. Then I felt like a child that hold a trumpet. I would like to read once again the line of the poem. Then I felt like a child that hold a trumpet. In this line, the word order has been changed. But the purpose, we should understand, to bring poetic touch or poetic quality. That is the main intention behind changing the word order. In this line, the correct word order is, then I felt like a child that hold a trumpet. But instead of, then I felt like a child that hold a trumpet, the line is, then I felt like a child that hold a trumpet. That is inversion. Okay. Next figure of speech is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is, or in this figure of speech, we understand the words that are expressed, the sound. It is onomatopoeia. See, the words that express the sound. You will understand after the example. The example is, down sunk the bell with a gurgling sound. In this line, sound is expressed in the word gurgling. We understand. In this line, sound is expressed in the word gurgling. That is onomatopoeia. Next figure of speech is interrogation. Sometimes poet makes use of questions in poetry. Question is asked to arouse curiosity in reader's mind. The purpose of this particular figure of speech is to ask question, to arouse curiosity in the minds of readers. For example, the line here is, does anyone remember that you spoke him today? See, the line of the poem here, does anyone remember that you spoke him today? In this line, the poet raises the question to think over. As I told you before, that sometimes poet makes use of different questions in their poems to create poetic, or to bring poetic quality. That is the intention, that is the main purpose of interrogation figure of speech. Next figure of speech is paradox. Paradox means what? Opposite words or ideas are brought together with the sense of sarcasm. Paradox is the use of opposite words or ideas. Opposite ideas and opposite words are brought together with the sense of sarcasm. That is paradox. You will understand after this example. Still I carry my old delicious burdens. See, you can notice the underlying expression, delicious burden. How would burdens are delicious? How it is possible? Burdens are not delicious. In this line, the poet has used contradictory expressions, contradictory words. That is paradox. Next, imagery. One of the important figure of speech or poetic devices is imagery. Imagery is visually descriptive or figurative language. Imagery, visually descriptive or figurative language. For example, you can understand this figure of speech after this example. The line here is, blue as wings of halcyon wild. Once again, I would like to read. Blue as wings of a halcyon wild. In this line, the reader can visualize the image or picture of kingfisher. After this line, one can easily understand or visualize the image of kingfisher in their mind. The image is there in front of the readers. That is imagery. Next figure of speech, okay, we will stop here and the remaining part of the poetic devices we will continue in our next video. Thank you.